Hello, everyone, and welcome to our roundtable discussion celebrating the Chinese photography exhibition, Paths Cross. My name is Ding Stewart, and I'm the curator at the Barty Art. Here at our collaborating gallery, NIDA Gallery, I have the distinct pleasure of spending time with our esteemed art professionals. We have Sean McGarry, the owner of NIDA Gallery, Robert Centenary, the publisher of the prominent art magazine Java. We are also joined by Jimmy Fike, a faculty member in the art department at Istria Mountain College and the author of the book Edible Plants. And we have Daizhen Huan, also known as Jaden Dai, an artist and photographer who recently graduated from ASU with majors in photography and sociology. Thank you all for being here today. I think one of our first questions that we can start with is, where do you see photography in the near future, especially with the impact of AI?
I think this is I don't think photography could be more important than right now in how all of our media is digested. And AI is, you can tell. And that's one of my biggest thing with artificially created anything, is that that is distinctly non-human created. It's getting better, and maybe that will change, but I think there's no substitute for the human part of it. There's just none. I think every time it can be told what to do, but it can't tell a story. And the best thing about successful photography is the storytelling. No robot's going to be able to tell a story unless you tell it to tell the story. And I think it's a great tool. I love artificial intelligence. I think it's going to be a necessary part of everybody's life, whether we like it or not, if not already is. But in the arts, I think people will panic, and there's going to be hack work that'll get removed from the equation, like it always does with new technology. But I don't think there's anything more important artistic discipline right now than photography, just because we use it for everything all the time, always. So that's what I think. Anyone else?
Yeah, certainly a really interesting and big moment in photography with some major shifts. And you do see that, like you're mentioning, like every time it seems like a new technology pops up, you get this reflexive response that like the sky is falling, sort of thing. And then we kind of adapt and figure out, the technology and how to use it. But I think there's going to be a real battle for the soul of photography related to AI too. I think a lot of the powers that be, I think, are promoting a type of AI-based photography that detaches photography further and further from reality, and in some ways that makes photography pretty impotent and unable to speak to real problems in profound ways. The AI-based photography that I've seen so far, it just looks kind of corny to me, and you can tell like it's fake, know, and in the way they're just kind of mining other artists' works and compositing stuff. I just don't think that AI-based photography has found its real kind of like conceptual footing yet. Because when I read about AI's potential in terms of parsing huge sets of data, making connections, figuring things out that sort of the human mind couldn't on its own because of limited computational power. There's real potentiality there, but I still think there's a gulf between the way photographers are using it and the way people more like scientists are using it. So I think there's going to be a bit of a battle to see if we can incorporate AI in a way that still addresses real world issues and problems and has type of power through association with reality that photography has trafficked in for a long time.
Like documentation photography, sure. Like when people are telling a story in live time, like a journalist would be, that's a different process where people can use a propaganda tool to say, oh, this happened, when it never really did. When you see a picture of Donald Trump hanging out with his boys at the cookout, that didn't happen, but it's close enough where if you want to believe that it happened, and I think is that the soul you're talking about, the that is deceptive intentionally through this tool, and we're disgracing the ability for photography to take a moment in its purest documentary form. Like, this is how it happened, what it looked like in that moment, and now we're losing that.
I think one of the things that regarding photography, there's always been this question of authenticity in terms of, even in the early days, people could do things in the darkroom, tricks and techniques
Sure.
of, let's take this person out of the image,
Ghost photography.
And then all of a sudden, Photoshop came about, right? And then even more stuff, right? And then now with AI, I think we just need to look at it as a tool.
Just another tool, 100%.
Just like the enlarger was, or the Photoshop program was, and now AI. Maybe you can use it for ideation or for whatever, or you could test some lighting conditions somehow. But yeah, when you're trying to fake stuff, I think people are always leery of that, right? But I think what you said, Jimmy, in terms of how it's going to challenge photography, because you can create these fantastical worlds that maybe you can't really capture in normal photography. So I think that in itself does pose some kind of challenge. What do you think, Jay?
I think that's a really good point. And when I was thinking about photography, the future of photography, and then the advancement of AI technology, I feel like it kind of goes back to the 2 points about photography that makes it so fascinating, which is this, like you said, authenticity, but I kind of phrased it as originality. And then there's that was the connection to reality. And then the other one would be originality. So photography, it's something that you created. It's something that you took a slice out of the reality, and it's your work. But with AI, the question becomes, who created the work? Maybe you put in the keywords, the descriptions, but the images that forms the final image, it comes from maybe some other artist or just some random image online that trained the AI. And the connection to reality, I feel like that's something that AI cannot replace, because it's definitely gonna cause some panic around, like, if this image is real. I think that's the biggest impact that AI is gonna have on photography and how we see image. Even though, like you said, Photoshop and the manipulations in darkroom can already do that, but AI can do that in a much higher level that humans just can't do. But I still believe in photography's ability to kind of defend those points that makes it fascinating. So yeah.
Do you think there's any important technique for creating a compelling photograph, either without or with AI's impact? And if not, what made people think that photography is a relatively lower entry media? Because before AI started to work, and someone pays attention to the techniques, and someone would think, like Cindy Sherman's instructor said, that only the story behind the work works. And that made Cindy Sherman a good photographer. But someone just still argued that techniques, it's very necessary, either without or.
Maybe who's got to climb and work to his position to get a shot of nature versus Cindy Sherman would synthesize a moment and then photograph that, like Matt Barney would do that. And so is the technique, the question about the setup for that would, because I am no photographer, and the only good photographs I've ever taken are in a moment that I just happened to be like, oh, and snapped it. Didn't think of it, it was just what was happening. It was either my daughter or like something, and it was just that. So for me, capturing, like being in the right place at the right time is a big thing for photography, because you get to witness what's happening in reality and somehow have the way to capture it.
I think the elements of design and composition
Yeah.
always come into play, whether it's a painting or a photograph, or, you know, it's always about composition, design, balance, you know, all the things that you probably teach in elementary photography courses and things at the college level, or, you know what I'm saying, like, do you have an opinion about...
All right, I'll go off on this one.
Yeah, there you go. Awesome.
I mean, I taught design for many years, so we always, you know, talked about, you know, composition and those sorts of things. So when you're talking about what makes a photograph good, well, you know, is it a good composition, right? That's one of the basic
No.
things.
Okay, yeah.
I mean,
Interesting.
Yeah, right? I was like,
I mean, it just depends on what you're trying to achieve with the photograph, right? And if you're trying to make a photograph like Man Ray, that's more of a piece of art, then it really comes back to those basic elements. But if you're trying to document nature, like Ansel Adams, then maybe it has more to do with climbing a mountain and setting up a 8x10 view camera and you know, all that stuff that is required to get the right shot.
perhaps the technique is defined by the purpose of the image.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like a form of classicism to think about conflating technique and artistry, and to think that somehow good technique generates good art. And you saw that manifest in modernist era in photography with groups like F64 and Ansel Adams, you know, where they really relied on that type of visualization and using, you know, huge cameras, huge negatives. And you see it still throughout photo discourses where people want, you know, the most expensive camera and the biggest lens and the best lens, and somehow they conflate that with being a good
Platinum
artist or a good
Yeah.
photographer, you know. But I come out of more of like a conceptual art tradition and even like a punk rock tradition, where good technique does not equal good art. It's like the opposite, right? It's like good ideas create good art, and you have to have the appropriate technique to convey the meaning, but it's not necessarily good technique, right?
Like, who's the...
Good technique is considered often like kind of stuffy, you know?
Like Leakey,
And-
right? The guy that went around taking
Yeah,
police photographs or
And
more
like-
photographs.
people
Who's the guy
lean
who
too much on the technique.
Cunningham?
Imogene.
No, it's the guy who took photographs of all like the artists and stuff like that. Oh yeah, sorry. In New York, Cunningham, Bill Cunningham, I believe. There's a documentary about him. He's would just ride around on his bike and just with his little snap camera, you know, just ding, you know, no lighting effects, no nothing, but kind of that punk rock sort of sensibility. I think the shot's out there. I'm just gonna go find it. And had some of the most beautiful, you know, shots of just New York, whether they're famous or just the normal cab driver or something like that.
But now we see that on Instagram every day because everybody's got a camera.
Everybody's
with
got a
them
camera.
all the time.
Yes, and that's
Right.
strange.
So now that the sort of rare era of somebody carrying a camera all the time, like in the 70s, like I never leave the house without it.
Mhm.
That's so diminished now because everybody has a camera all the time.
Bill is super popular in China.
Bill Cunningham, okay, yeah. Okay, so you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really cool guy.
Yeah, so I'd love to know your thoughts on Jimmy. What are your thoughts on? Oh, I need that. What are your thoughts on the post-production? It's if techniques are not important while you are producing the artwork, what about the post-production? Do you think if an average photographer could make the image compelling by heavy post-production?
In post-production.
Yes, and would it affect the authenticity of the photo itself? What do you think?
Well, don't get me wrong. Technique is hugely important because that ends up being the aesthetic, and the aesthetic carries a lot of the meaning and the content, right? But I think it's just misleading to say like good technique creates good art, right? Because that's like classicism. And so yeah, post-production I think is amazing. I mean, my work is all about post-production. That's all I do.
Your work is about
and that's how I concoct my world and my universe and my meanings and my aesthetic is through that process. And it takes some time and a lot of trial and error and a good processes and things like that. So I'm not trying to diminish the role of technique. I'm just trying to reframe it in relationship to meaning and content.
So I think about technique a little bit like an athlete would do like a workout regimen in their equipment. That is important. It's good to have correct shoes, the right equipment, but certainly not an athlete does it make. Mm-hmm. And maybe perhaps the same sort of analogy with what you're talking about with like technique. Like you can have all that technique, it's good to have it, but it's not necessarily gonna, by doing all that, give the domino effect to have a great work. It doesn't work like that. It needs to be there, but it's not everything. There's that element of the artist's hand, of the vision of who's doing it, that's got to be there. And
and there's plenty of examples where people use bad technique on purpose to generate good art. And I think that's where that sports metaphor kind of hits a dead end, right? Nobody loses football games on purpose.
No, but I suppose you're right. But I suppose
that would be an awesome conceptual art piece if they did. But.
Right. But I think sometimes. I think sometimes their athletes won't use the up-to-date stuff. They like their old stuff, like either their type of bat or things like that. But I think I see where you're getting at.
Going back to like the classical idea, like everybody says Picasso, supposedly Picasso was a fantastic realist painter artist in his early days, and if you look at some of his early works, he was pretty
very accomplished
in that way. But because he had that technique in his bag, he could then break the technique and then move on to just being completely free of it, of any of that classical.
Absolutely.
But sort of the argument is you kind of have to have it first in order to deviate from it. I don't know if that's true.
I think it brings to a place where knowing what you're breaking and how you're breaking it is like you can smash a window, but if you're making mosaic, you have to make sure you know how you're cracking it to get it done right. And I think that's always been the case with any most, I will say, abstract artists will have that background of like full painterly style. They know what they're doing with composition, and they know their all the technique tools you use, and then they go from there and are able to kind of dismantle or play around with it. A lot of the ABX guys are like that. But I like the discussion of fundamentals. I think that's really important. Nobody's just going to jump in and do it, especially if you're going to build consistency. Because anybody can do it once or twice if it happens, but in my opinion, you're not an artist until you have a system, be it broken as it may be or backwards, but you have to have that system to rely on to be able to be consistent, or else you don't have consistency. If you don't have consistency, that's it. You're a firecracker.
I feel like that's more like experience on building the consistency, because we're talking about making good art, right? And I feel like good, like you said, good techniques doesn't really guarantee you consistency in making good art, but maybe combining some techniques and then lots of experience, then you can make good art on a consistent basis. But going back to if techniques are important, I feel like Robert had a good point, which is that you do kind of need to get that. You need to know what the techniques are, and you, at least me personally, whenever I look at a photo, I look for the composition, and I look at the, did you, like, because a lot of times, if we're talking about documentary photography or street photography, you can see if that photographer waited for that moment to appear. Like, is the lighting right? Is the composition right? And a lot of times you need to wait for a long time to get that. And I considered that as techniques, and I do think techniques are important. It's definitely not sufficient to make good art just with techniques, but and at the same time, techniques shouldn't be a barrier for beginner photographers to start creating. You should start creating and try to find something that's interesting in your art, and then build on the techniques. So that's my point.
So
What
that's a
kind
great
of
comment.
photography do you do? I mean, digital or film?
I do mostly digital.
Yeah, one last question related to this topic. What do you think handcraft photograph compared to digital photos? And do you see any difference in their values and the impact? This is a question for every.
It's a great
everyone.
question.
So maybe Jalen, you can go first.
I wouldn't say that there's a difference in value, because that's different for every person. But they're definitely very different. And I respect those people that only, because I know friends that only shoot with black and white film. They don't shoot digital, they don't shoot color, they only do black and white film. And that's their choice. But a lot of times, maybe because I was born in 2001, so pretty much the cameras that that got me started doing photography were digital
All
cameras.
digital, right.
So film camera was something that I had to learn later. I was like, oh, there's this thing, and it's pretty interesting. It's a much slower process, and there's those benefits that kind of comes with film photography. That's kind of meditative. But just going back to making good art or whatever, I feel like you can accomplish that in all of those ways. It just kind of depends on which way you choose.
That's really the most important. If it's the first day you pick up your camera, you take an amazing picture. It's an amazing picture no matter what your process is. That's the goal. It's how we're getting there.
Yeah.
Consistently.
Yeah. It's a little bit like, parsing hairs. I think digital photographs, analog photographs, they still work very, very similar end results in the way they work as a communication system, right? You're still kind of looking at a piece of paper. It's got pigment or ink. It's depicting an image. You can use filters in Photoshop to make it look like film. You can make it black and white, even if you shot in color, etc. So I just don't think there's that huge of a divide in the end. There's this sort of sect of folks who are so into film photography, and it's always struck me as a little bit ironic how they are preaching this idea about the handicraft sort of side of it being what makes it art. Which I say is ironic because photography is what kind of upended that notion in art, right? When photography was coming to its own as an art, that was the critique of photography, is that it's too mechanical, you're pushing a button, there's no handicraft, right? And photography kind of upended that notion, but now you see a certain group of people trying to fall back.
Doing exactly
There's a type of nostalgia, I think, embedded in that.
Of it.
There's a type of nostalgia embedded in that.
There's a craft element.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's any kind of relationship in music with people that only listen to vinyl records.
Exactly what I was thinking of.
You
It's
know what I
there's
mean?
purists. It's like,
Yeah, or a tube amplifier.
Mhm.
They don't even like solid state.
Right.
And we have a tube amplifier with a vinyl record.
yeah.
That's it.
And there's something to be said about that. There is truly, but for me, the speaker system is going to make that happen.
The warmth and
That's
the
what's
analog.
really going to give it. You're going to have my daughter has this record player on and it's cool, but it's on the crappiest speakers. So
Yeah.
in that you don't get anything from it. It's not necessarily that. It's it's the system is getting played through.
But, I think there's something really neat looking at historical images and knowing that they're analog and knowing that what you're seeing is an actual imprint of the light bouncing off of something and etching it into the film. I mean, there's just like a real resonant relationship with history and with the past, through that process. So
You're kind of
I always appreciate that with historical images.
Right, and you're kind of strapped to whatever film those companies were producing.
Oh wow!
Right, like it's a
Think of that.
Kodachrome,
Yeah.
or it's a Tri-X, or a Plus X.
And film and real photographic paper. The cross section of it is so remarkably like a record. It's like
Is it really?
it's grooved from the light.
Oh,
when
yeah.
the light hits, the silver sticks together.
Oh, is that
Right, where the
yeah.
light didn't hit,
Uh-huh.
the silver gets
That's
washed
right,
away.
washed away.
So
Interesting.
it's
So
very
that's
much
the-
like an analog,
It's
like
there's a
record
relief
imprint.
system on it
Uh-huh.
that we understand visually. Interesting. I didn't know that.
I do think like analog photography has it's I understand why some people prefer analog photography, just like that physicalness, right? But when you brought up how photography was like the one that kind of started or brought a dispute between if it's photography art, and there are people that think film photography is better than digital photography, and now there's AI, right? Like in the future, probably there are going to be a lot of people that use AI to produce images. And am I going to be the one that's like
Yeah.
film photographers right now saying that, oh, no AI in photography, like only strictly just use your digital camera, take a photo, and then that's it. That's photography, not AI. But I feel like there's just always this kind of, young, newer things, newer technology that comes out, and then just changes everything.
I wonder what percentage of the images in this show were shot with a phone as opposed to a camera.
They're all camera, and in this room they're all film.
Oh.
And the others are digital.
This is all
And
film.
this-
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, but I mean, like, even when we watched the documentary the other day,
camera.
he was using his phone to do his
Yeah. You're
to
right.
make those large images. And I mean, I'm certain that some of these images were shot with a phone.
Could have been, yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
sometimes you get something on your phone that's so good that you
That's
just want to.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's-
Super sophisticated cameras. Bill.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy what it can do. It's really. I don't think that's a step back at all, or saying, "Oh, you did this with a phone." You're like, "Yeah, what's the camera that's in my phone right now? I don't even have a good camera phone. Is so much further ahead than what cameras were like in 2003.
Digital camera.
Yeah, it's like, and it's not like decades back. That's not that long ago.
And the audiences that are going to be watching this roundtable, it's shot on iPhone,
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And it's not possible like 10 or 15 years ago using a phone to shoot a documentary or an
And I
interview
don't know
or
what's
roundtable.
important about that except the fact that we all have phones with us
all the time.
time. We always have a camera on us. It's 100% of the time, right? I don't know if you take many photos with your phone. Yeah.
There's that that dog.
Oh yeah, you did. That's right. That's right. The building, right?
The subway.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
There's this thought out there that photography is the greatest folk art that's ever been created, right? Not everybody paints, not everybody plays piano, but do you know anybody that doesn't take pictures with their phone, right? So it's turned everybody into a photographer, even if it's at kind of a folk art level, and so it's just like the digital version of a brownie or something like that. This art is introduced to everyone.
That's a really profound way to.
brownie.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is so cool. So let's go deeper a little bit. Does anyone of you consider it important to take the photo by the photographer themselves, or the photographer can just conceptualize and hire somebody else to really click the shutter and do the retouch and all the post production?
I think a lot of directors do that.
So in a film, the director will say, okay, here's the shot. I need you here, and he's going to be directing. I think that's absolutely legitimate. I think that's part of a bigger process. If Michael Bay is the director for a movie and you see the sweeping shot, is that Michael Bay's shot? Yeah. Now well, that brings us to something like Jeff Koons, who never touches a canvas or a sculpture, but it's his work. So I think, like it or not, that's how it is. And if you're the guy, I have the idea, I need to hire you, or if I got my hands blown off and I physically can't do that anymore, but I still have the concept, it's still my work. That's
Even
this
back
is
in the
precedent.
day, like classical photographers had guys that would print their work.
Mm-hmm.
It was very normal to have somebody that you would shoot the picture, but then you would send your negative to the printer, who would then do the work in the darkroom.
And you write how many stops you want on a specific area. Yeah.
That's a great point.
Yeah, I feel like that's the difference between, not like the difference, but if you're talking about someone that hires someone else to press the shutter or to do the lighting, but it's your idea and you're the one that's telling them what to do. That's kind of like the director in a film, and I think they are the artist. And if you're strictly about doing everything on your own, then you're the photographer / the artist. So I think
What's your
it's the
blind
idea.
photographer? There was that conceptual art movement in the 70s where a lot of it was just writing down directions, so the art piece is like a folio with directions on stuff that's written down. You don't actually produce the work. It's just
Really?
you conceptualize it. It's conceptual artwork.
So you have to kind of visualize it.
Conceptual art.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure if Ding Ding wants to go back to AI, but you do, right? Because we're talking about the artist being the one that has the idea and then hire someone else to do it. But isn't that what's
Isn't
happening
that
with
just-
Midjourney? Right? You're
Yeah.
kind of outsourcing
But it's not
the image
someone
making.
else, it's a someone computer else.
Yeah, it is a machine.
Or it's
Yeah.
a collective.
And you're taking all this other artists' work without their permission or anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I am that kind of person. I want to embrace AI, but I will feel a bit disappointed if a photograph is completely by AI, like that piece, the King Kong and the building,
Yeah.
and the little ghost lady. And then they told me at the beginning, that's completely by AI. So I was so guilty because I told our guests that they're all photographed. How could I call an AI work photograph? But then fortunately, I asked the artist himself again. And he clarified. He said he shot every scene. Just the post production is he photoshopped
I
it. It's
see.
not AI. So I felt much better. But it's not. I'm not opposed to AI. It's just the feeling. I still need time to accept.
I think there's that wavy ground of whose is it, how's it being credited. All the images that came weren't images that it generated. It's calling back its data that it's mined through the internet of everybody else's stuff. If I type in Godzilla, it's going to pull whoever created Godzilla, that picture. So it's not creating it, it's taking. And I think what you brought up a bunch of times is that this machine learning is just taking all these other artists' ideas and then giving it to you. So you're having, I wouldn't say, maybe, but a mass highway robbery plagiarism brought to the forefront where, nobody's getting credited for the work they've done, that you get credit for yours on the shoulders of everything else that everybody's done from all time.
Yeah. And,
It's sticky.
I don't have any issues with appropriation art. There's a whole movement that's appropriation art, and it's conceptually really interesting to me. It's ideas about ownership and copyrights, and as an artist, shouldn't you have some recourse to respond to images that you're being inundated with or that have affected you and things like that? So I don't know, we're kind of doubling back on the AI stuff. So I just feel like, to me, it's more about it's like a power thing, about like hegemonic forces versus the people is what I say. You know, I think ever since like the civil rights movement and the Vietnam War and some of the more radical avant-garde art movements around that time, those sort of forces have constantly tried to find ways to make photography less powerful, to have less social impact. And that's my fear with AI, is that they're finding a way to make photography so divorced from reality that it can't affect political discourse and things like that, right?
Yeah.
We talked about movie directors and photographs in the fashion industry. So my next question is, which genre of photography resonate with you the most? Have you ever leaned toward creating any market-friendly photos? Like landscape is very popular. People tend to buy landscape more than any other, maybe more conceptual themes. And or dogs is super popular. You can do anything with a photo with dogs in it. So what do you think about this market-friendly to please your audience?
I like that. I think I've always been drawn to like high fashion art, Dave LaChapelle stuff. I think there's a way to take a photograph to transport people to a fantasy that's kind of fun. But I also love street art and street, like the kind of opposite side of that, where what's his name? Aaron Friedman was this photographer, or Glenn Friedman, sorry, who photographed a lot of skate bands in like Minor Threat and a lot of like DC, New York City punk bands. And I also love that too, where it's like really like gritty moments. And so I can't say I certainly have I like the storytelling, whether it's manufactured to sell me shampoo, or if it's something that I see some of my favorite bands, in that like awesome moment of live music that, it's kind of you had to be there, but we have this great shot. And I think the storytelling aspect of taking a two-dimensional stationary work and be able to tell the whole story through that is my favorite type of photography. So that's me.
I think, photography was originally a tool of a documentary tool, wasn't it? Maybe, a way to like document the world around you. And then, so like the punk rock scene, that's a document thing. But then you've got like people like Joel Peter Wicken who will spend, a month probably creating a scenario and then finally taking that photo of it. Mm-hmm. So then it's just sort of like pre-production as opposed to documentary photography, which I don't really have an opinion of. It's just different uses for the same medium, I guess.
Yeah, if you're asking me like what my favorite types of photography are, I would say more like conceptual traditions of photography. I like having like deep conversations with the photographs and photographs that are trying to meaningfully engage with important topics and dynamics that we face in the contemporary world. So, that's my favorite type of work, and work I think that has a lot of potential to shift people's consciousness or to give them a deeper understanding into complex dynamics. So, I'm not a real big fan of art as decoration. I don't think it has much power, and kind of destroys art's radical transformative power. I understand a place for that type of decorative stuff in domestic environments or office buildings. I mean, people want their spaces to look nice, and that type of, I don't even want to call it art, but that kind of stuff can do that, but I don't really consider that art. Art to me is something that's much more powerful and kind of taps into something that's very sacred to me. And that, I feel like that stuff's more like a result of market forces and has been just turned into decoration.
There's something to say for pure aesthetics. Like when I look at the face with the flower and the vase, I think it's just such a beautiful image, and it's aesthetic. And aesthetics have a power of their own. Beauty has a power of its own.
Yeah.
So
and you can certainly recognize when somebody has that skill, you know, and makes those type of objects, you know, like that modernist furniture and stuff like that. You know, you just look at that and like, wow, that is sexy. Good job designing that. You know?
Yeah, I like that too.
Yeah.
I don't mind a photo being all about aesthetics as long as it's the photographer or the artist that's like, if it's their wish for the art, as long as they didn't just produce that to appeal to the market. But there's also the relationship between artists and the market, because I feel like what people want is important as well. And although I don't think artists should appeal like just to make work to appeal to the market so that they can make more money, but getting to know what kind of art people like is important, because that reflects on what the public or just ordinary people, like their preferences on artwork. Maybe they just want something that's beautiful on the wall, and it's perfectly fine for some artists to create something that's beautiful, and then they can put it up on their wall and, you know, appreciate it. Yeah.
And that's where you get like Thomas Kincaid from. That kind of stuff. You ever seen that? Thomas Kincaid?
I mean, you could argue that the Impressionists are purely, you know, aesthetic, but they're still considered to be great artists, right?
Well, I think they've
People
become that now,
and
you know. But in their time, that was pretty radical stuff that they were doing, and really interesting and deep explorations into color, light,
Haystack series, like
sensory, you know, stuff.
just
But
same haystack at
Haystack,
different
living
times of day,
patterns,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, just how the sun is. We're just gonna document sun and light change, color, right? Just gonna inspect this. Yeah, like that. Gustav Moreau was like, I will paint an angel when you show me one. I love that quote, and it's like really kind of set itself to that next, that next phase of art. It's like, yeah, I'll paint your angel, but you got to show me one.
Yeah.
And that was a big division in the art world, where, because at the time, like Titian was painting, everybody's painting these beautiful paintings. They're gorgeous, but is it real?
Yeah.
No, it's not. It's not real. It's not realistic. It's in the human form, and I think that's sort of the debate we're talking about in photography. Is that, you know, is it real? So we're taking what are we documenting here? So it's a camera, but, you know, this isn't real life in this image, because, you know, but then this one is a fragment of a moment that happened. So I think that's a fun thought exercise to kind of play around with. But it's been these have been debates centuries old, you know, probably millennia, in one way or another.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the next question, I would like to have Jimmy and Jaden answer me first. I hope you guys are not broken artists. So what kind of challenges and difficulties have you faced while running your art business? I know Jaden is still young and your career is very just started, but I'm sure you have some challenges. And what kind of, yeah. So whoever wants to go first.
Sounds like you got
Yeah, and
blues song to sing.
yeah, and also
Well, as an artist, you always have those songs.
Yeah. Those and the other ones.
Is there a difference between your artwork and your documentary work? Like, I'm taking photos of a gallery opening, or I'm making photography for myself, you know?
Whenever I get a commission or photograph for work, I always try to make some works for myself too, because, you know, you, as an artist, I think there are a lot of artists that draw inspirations from their work to make art, right? So I think I see that as an opportunity to make art, not just as a job. I recently graduated, so I've been kind of facing the I've been in the phase of kind of going out of college, and because in college you pretty much only the biggest thing is about homework and making work for your project for class, right? During my years in college, whenever people ask me like, tell me about that photograph or tell me about that series, I'm always like, oh, I made this for this class. But after college, there are more realistic issues to face, like money. And recently, I got a full-time job, which hasn't started, but it has nothing to do with art. And it has very little to do with photography. But I feel like half a year out of college, I've kind of come to accept the fact that you kind of have to make money while making art. But like I said before, I'll still, I'll still like keep that eye as an artist at work. Always try to observe, always see what's going on here, and then are there interesting things that I could express through art about that work or about that industry. But I really want to hear what Jimmy has to say about this question.
Well, I'd say I'm really fortunate that I have a great day job, so I don't have to, make a living off of my art. Because if I did, I'd be dead. It's hard to live off a few $1,000s a year. So, I feel like I've had a good number of successes in the art world in terms of exhibitions and publishing and getting my work, into magazines or newspapers and stuff like that. So, the work's getting out there, it's doing its job, and I'm really happy about that. That's really what it's all about to me. So I believe kind of in the message of my work, and I believe that it's got a job to do, and in order to do its job, it's got to get in front of people and eyeballs, and that's happening a lot. So that makes me happy.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, and I was going to say, I think a lot of us were brought up with this idea about art making and being an artist, that it's all about like pain, suffering, sacrifice, going to the depths of your despair and psychological issues and kind of wallowing in that darkness and risking. Think of how many poor artists that died young, committed suicide and stuff like that because they've kind of followed that model. But I'm happy to report that somewhere along the way, I kind of shucked that whole tradition, a way of thinking about art. My work is about healing and about connection, and and it's about exploring philosophical things that I'm super interested in, and it helps provide answers and clarity to that stuff. So, I don't feel like my work is filled with challenges and difficulty. It's quite the opposite. It's filled with reward. Yeah. So it's just about how you frame your practice in relationship to those issues. You can create an art practice that's based in something, I think, a bit more positive, without it becoming like cheesy or lacking depth or sophistication.
Can you tell us a little bit about your book, Edible Plant?
Sure. Yeah. For about 16 years, I was traveling all over the USA, finding and photographing wild edible plants. So the book version features about 113 of my plants. They are colorized to show you which part is edible. And then we created the book to kind of be like a field guide, but a coffee table version of a field guide. So it's a nice big book, but it's got my photograph on one side and then a written description like you might find in a field guide about what the plant looks like, where it might grow, what part is edible, stuff like that. So, thank you.
Oh, cool. So, what's the worst tasting but edible?
Well, probably the one that's the most funky. I couldn't even eat it because it just smells so damn bad. It's called skunk cabbage. So it
lives up to it, I suppose.
It is.
Good to
You
know.
don't have any mushroom. It's mostly leafy plants in your book.
Yeah, mushrooms aren't plants.
Oh,
How about that?
fungi.
They are not.
They're
No.
not.
So they're just fungus.
They're just fungus. They're home.
They're spore grown, not
They're their own
seeds.
thing.
Yeah.
You got plants, animals, and fungus. That's the three kingdoms.
Oh, I did want to ask you a question about, because with my short experience of dealing with other artists, getting to know other artists, I've seen some artists that went full-time, and because they have to make money off of their art, so that money making, that pressure from the financial pressure kind of pushes their art to go to a certain direction, and that might not be something that they originally wanted. So I was wondering, do you think if you were to be a full-time artist or full-time photographer, do you think that's going to have a big impact on your artistic practice? And do you think you'll be doing the same thing that you're doing right now?
Yeah, that's an interesting thought exercise. You know, in some ways, I feel like the work that I am making is very sellable. I'm just not really great at marketing, and I just don't really push that side of it so much. You know, so I think, you know, the work that I'm making has that kind of potentiality if I really pushed it, and it wouldn't, you know, it wouldn't sacrifice the quality or the meaning or those kind of things. But honestly, I do think that quite often that probably happens where you start off with the best intentions as an artist, and the market slowly does its thing over time, and your work adapts to that to maximize sales. And, you know, I don't begrudge anybody that. I mean, everybody's got to try their best to just make a living and survive in this jungle that we live in. So, you know, that just happens. That's how it is. Yeah.
It's almost 3. It's 2:50, I think. And I have a few questions and see which one you want to answer. Let's have 2 or 3 more.
We can do the lightning round.
Yeah.
We do it quick.
The lightning round.
Lightning round. We just answer quick. Yeah.
No.
I want to see all of them.
Yes, no.
Yeah. Right.
Yes or no?
Exactly.
Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Okay. So this one I think is important. Is each one of you has different hats, and how do you balance the different roles?
You have to get used to letting some people down. I think that's part of it for me, anyways. And knowing overall what you want to accomplish, and it's going to take some time. I think time management is a big thing. Knowing that the goals that you want to accomplish, you know, the bigger they are, they're going to take a lot longer than you ever thought. But that gives me the peace when you're, you know, having family and running business and full-time job, and, you know, and trying to have any sort of like personal, you know, things in the middle of it. And I think there's understanding that what you want to accomplish is just going to take some time. And luckily, you know, there's time. You know, it's, you know, life is short, but it's also, there's a lot of gaps in there. You know, and I think being aware of that and filling those up with as efficiently as possible, and making sure you're doing it because you like it, you know, and, you know, that you'll do it whether you're getting paid tons of money for it or you barely get anything for it, and that's okay. You know, I'm going to do this with my life no matter what. And when you kind of come to that, like, things slow down, you're less panicky. You're like, okay, you know, this is it, you know. And I think that's the thing for most artists, is that I'm going to do this whether, you know, there's a million people out the door, you know, looking to give me high fives and I walk out, or nobody knows my name ever. And I'm still going to be doing the same thing as best as I possibly can, with the most energy to the top level, and understanding that. And for me, that's the way I am able to kind of have a few different hats at the same time. Just having some patience that this is what I do.
Go ahead, Jimmy.
Well, I feel like I'm fortunate to be a professor, in that, you know, I've got a good job, good salary, benefits, and still get, you know, a good bit of time off to where I can make art. So I think I'd really struggle to make art if I worked 40 hours a week, you know, 50 weeks a year. That's just probably grind the creative impetus right out of me. So, you know, I feel fortunate in that regard, and I feel like I've tailored my practice to fit that type of schedule, you know, where it's like during the summers when I'm off, I can travel around and photograph the plants, and then the rest of the year I can just sit on my computer and plug away and do Photoshop. You know, it's like slow and steady. Slow and steady. You know, I can do it for a morning and for an hour before I go to work, and then I can do it for another hour or so when I get home after work. And just if you just kind of are persistent with that kind of a schedule, you end up being very productive and getting a lot done. But I feel like I have too much like ADHD or something to sit there for 5, 6, 7 hours and make art. So it's nice to be able to just kind of like whenever I'm feeling it and I've got the time, I can sit down and make some progress. But I've got my system down. It's not like I'm having to go to the studio and come up with a new idea all the time, which is very time intensive and takes a lot of experimentation and those kind of things. So in some ways I feel like just over time my practice kind of figured a way to fit into my professional obligations and plug in good ways. Yeah.
So as far as wearing a lot of hats and still doing creative projects, I mean, things got a lot easier for me after COVID once I decided not to continue doing the print edition of the magazine and just go strictly digital. So that cut a lot of the legwork out of the process, and a lot of the hustle.
I can't imagine.
Yeah, so now, I mean, my life is pretty easy, and I try to just live a creative life, even if it's just, what am I going to make for dinner? I'm always trying to use my creative instincts to just, live my life in the most interesting, enjoyable way possible. It's very simple. As far as wearing hats, I'm a publisher, I'm an editor, I work with artists, I write, I edit, etc. And it's all very manageable and enjoyable, and it works for me, so I have no complaints.
I think you get better at it over time as well.
Yeah.
Where it's you get more efficient.
Longevity, seniority
Absolutely.
kind of thing. Get good at what you do.
Yeah.
I remember when I used to have to write, it would be all this anxiety. I gotta write this thing. Now it's just like, sit down and just do it. It's kind of,
you channel that profession, like, okay, this is what I want to say. This is how I want to say it.
yeah.
It's nice. That goes through a lot of experience.
Glad to hear that's gonna get better, because I'm in that phase right now.
Yeah.
In a precarious spot though, I've seen so many people that graduate with MFAs and are very talented and are very excited about what the future holds, and then they hit the realities of the art world and making it in the art world, and they just kind of
The photographers I know
give out.
that do
It's just a hard path.
full time do whatever they do. Portraiture, they do events, they do commercial, they do what they have to do, and then they hopefully still have time to do their creative personal work too.
Yeah.
And as far as photography goes, if that's what you want to do full time, you can do it. I have many friends that are full time photographers, and I know quite a few full time artists too. That's all they do.
Yeah. But for me, I'm still in the process of figuring out how to balance those different roles, because I'm done with some roles, like student artist. I feel like that's kind of like a pretty special role. It's very interesting. But at the same time, getting some new roles, like gonna get a full-time job that's 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year, and I'm excited to see how that goes, because there are some aspects about being in a full-time position and in a big company I think that could help me in some way, like if I could leverage that. Also being financially stable, that's good. But yeah, for me, I'm still trying to figure out how to balance between those roles. Yeah.
Our world, man, it takes a lot of perseverance and stubborn resolve. And man, I think when you're talking about the complications and stuff like that, I think one of the ones is learning how to deal with rejection You know, you just get so much rejection in this field. Full speed ahead, you know, just keep at it.
I just wanted to say, obviously, every one of you is going to have one more hat, a roundtable speaker. We're going to do it more. I enjoy it. Okay, the next question. I'm not sure if you want to answer this question. What are your thoughts on Phoenix as an art city, art market? Have you ever thought about relocate or going to other cities to advance your career?
Okay, can I answer that first? Because I think my question is my answer is gonna be the simplest. Because I'm fairly New York here. I definitely want to relocate. I've spent about 4 years in Phoenix, and I'm really grateful for my time here. Met really good friends, and I feel like friends and connections with people are the biggest reason that I'm still staying here after graduation. But in terms of the art market, how vibrant the city is in terms of art or photography, or even the temperature, how rare it rains. I mean, it rained last night. I was really happy. For me, I feel like I'm completely, my ideal city is completely opposite of Phoenix, kinda. At least for this stage, because I love to be in a city that's much more vibrant and has a lot more going on, so that I can meet more people, see more things, and go to somewhere more international. So yeah.
I think it's what you make of it, and I think it's very important to keep in mind that in my experience, if you go to certain places, there are opportunities there, sure, but for me, I like it here because my family's here, and for me, if I feel like I can't do it here, I don't know what makes me think I could do it anywhere else. It's not like there's nothing. In fact, I'm energized in the fact that I see opportunities all around me. There are people that aren't doing the things that we're doing. That for me that's the pioneering nature of it. That's always something I'd rather do. I don't want to jump and follow on somebody else's current. I'd rather be the one that does it the first time, or proves where everybody's like, and then all of a sudden it looks obvious when somebody does it. And I think there's nothing holding anybody back here. There's really isn't. And but just I think everybody's just kind of waiting for that moment that something changes or something happens, and that's why I like it here. I think there's tons of opportunity, and you get to see what could happen and that possibility. That's what I think.
I think the city has some geographic challenges in kind of the same way that LA does. It's a huge valley that's spread out, and it has little nodes of activity. Downtown Tempe, downtown Mesa, and so that's the challenge. Is we don't have a center. I mean, downtown Phoenix is the center, and it has gotten much better with ASU coming down here and bringing that energy. But I think there's been a lot of progress, and there's still opportunity here. What you're saying, because if you go to a market like New York or something to try to break into being a gallerist or whatever you want to try to do there's so many other people that are already there doing it, and that are lining up to do it. And so here it's still a little bit of the Wild West. There's still opportunities, there's still things that can be done, but there's enough good solid cultural foundation here, I think so, to build off of. Yeah,
I think it's a really fun, vibrant art scene. I've got so many friends who are artists, so I love having such a big group of friends who are also artists, and I feel fortunate to have been in a gallery in Roosevelt Row back in the day when it really was the arts district, and man, it was just popping. And I just met so many folks back then that have ended up being connections here 15 years later. I think there's a really strong mural scene here and street art kind of scene. which I'm not part of, and there's a lot of ASU folks here, and I'm also not part of that, but I've got friends in those groups. I'm a little bit of a, I feel like outsider looking into those groups, but know lots of friends in there. I'd say like if I was going to try and like make it as an artist, it probably wouldn't be Phoenix, where I would choose to go, because it's not a real big environmental arts movement here, and there's not a real, I think, strong commercial gallery scene here, right? There's just a few, I think, really good galleries that are super hard to get into and stuff like that.
Where would you go?
Where would I go? Well, that's a good question. I don't even know. I mean, Beijing. Yeah, Berlin or New York, or like a place in Mexico, like Santa Fe, has a real strong history for environmental arts, ecological arts. That's a real hotbed of that kind of stuff. Yeah, so I don't know, but hey, I live in the real world where I had to get a job, and this is where I got a job, and rest is history.
I love it here, Phoenix.
Oh, cool.
Can I add something real quick? Even though I've said that I'm Phoenix is now my favorite city, but I do agree that there are a lot of opportunities, and I've the past few months I've started to trying to start a artist initiative / galleries / artist collective, kinda. We're not exactly sure what that is, but I do feel like maybe because I feel like Phoenix needs more energy, and I think that's why I was kind of pushed by that thought on Phoenix to wanting to start something here. And I think if I was in a much bigger city where there are already a lot of stuff going on, I wouldn't start that by myself. I would just be like, see something that's interesting and be like, oh, can I do it with you guys?
Yeah.
Right. So that, at least to me, a lack of organizations for those kind of groups definitely pushes me to think about what I can do just as myself and with other friends. So, yeah.
I like that. The DIY nature of it is my favorite part. If it's not there, you get to create it, and that's going to happen wherever you go.
If you ever thought about go to another city, how would you prepare yourselves? And if you don't, can you give some Chinese artists who ever want to move to the United States or to have exhibitions here, what kind of advice you would give to those Chinese artists? So twofolds, either one.
If I was going to give advice to somebody, I would recommend going somewhere where there's a community that you feel like you could plug into. I think that's really important. But the biggest thing we're thinking and talking about, in my opinion, here is that the connection to the artist community is the best. That's what keeps me doing it. When you're like, why am I doing this? It's because artists are my favorite people to hang out with. These types of rooms are not possible in normal life. It doesn't happen, and I'm powerfully bored when I'm not in a room like this. And for me personally, it's important to plug into something like that. You go into something and then you realize that's not it, but you're already there, but something presents itself. And just check the weather. That's also a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the issues is that most of the cities with the best art scenes are also the most expensive cities. So unless you're rich, really rich, you're probably going to have a hard time in New York. Unless you live in a 300 square foot apartment with 6 other people. And
no studio.
Yeah, like those kind of things. The cost is so prohibitive that it makes it very difficult. So I think a good strategy is to go to a medium-sized or smaller-sized town that still has a decent art scene, and you can find some inspiration, some camaraderie, but you can get rent that's a third of the price and free yourself time-wise to make a lot of art. And I don't think where you live is as important as it used to be because of technology, social media, finding your communities online and putting your work directly in front of them through those kind of technological avenues. So that's probably what I would do at this stage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have much advice really on
Yeah.
in that area. I mean, I'm a native Phoenician, and I'm here, and I'm staying, you know. So there's not really much to say about that.
Yeah.
You know,
That's the
I'm
thing.
established, so I'm not
Keep
going
that.
anywhere.
Right.
But as far as Chinese artists moving to the U.S., I mean, I have a good friend, Junia, who came over with her husband, and he was they're both artists, and they ended up, you know, getting established here, doing fine. East Valley, you know, in the East Valley, there's lots of Asian grocery stores and Asian restaurants and Asian culture to, you know, embrace.
I
And
think that's
that would be
important.
a pretty good landing spot for somebody that was coming from a totally foreign country, from China.
What aspects do you believe best represent American culture or American spirit? Please just provide one.
Sense of humor.
Sense of humor, that's nice. It's sort of freedom. It's kind of like that California surfer attitude, right? You can do whatever you want. You're not in a rigid system, right? It's not a rigid system here. There's a lot of looseness and a lot of embracing of creativity, even if it's just a creative lifestyle. And to me, that's ultimately when I think about the word freedom. What does freedom mean? It means that you can create your own existence, and you can do what you want to do. And so, really, I mean, it's kind of a cliche: land of the free. You know, home of the brave, land of the free. I mean, there is a lot of freedom here. As of now, we've been fortunate enough to grow up in a system that was
Embrace that.
embraced.
Yeah, I think that maybe our idea about individualism is pretty unique in my travels around different countries and stuff like that. That's one big difference I see here. And it's a double-edged sword. You know, maybe there is a relationship between that and freedom, you know, personal choice, personal decisions, these kind of things. But I think the downside is often there's less of a collective sense of belonging, maybe a little bit harder to establish sense of community, less social safety net sort of stuff.
Can lead to narcissism.
Anything
Anything you want to, Jaden?
I feel like they pretty much cover the main things that the U.S. is to me. Maybe it's kind of under freedom, which is the openness to possibilities. A lot of things can happen here. Anything can happen here. I think that's very important for artists.
Did you get to talk about what makes America unique? I didn't know.
I think our sense of humor is what really truly separates this country in a lot of ways, but there is a freedom to tell jokes and to take things not as seriously. I think it's one of our biggest exports, no question about it. I think personally, I think there's a sense of humor. A lot of our news, I don't know if this happens in other countries, but a lot of our news is delivered in a humorous format. You know, I don't know how unique that is, but we're taking something very serious and we have the ability to turn it into something funny, but still relevant. And I think there is definitely a unique sense of that for being the United States.
It's a lightness.
It's a lightness.
of,
Right.
you know.
And I like that.
Thank you, everyone. And I'd like to say thank you to Image and I for providing this opportunity. They gave us all the artists. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's take a picture.
One selfie.